Okay, so our second lesson is same as the first, except the numbers are going to be a little bit harder to deal with. Okay, there'll be a little bit more problematic. So we're still learning to change a quadratic from standard to vertex form and determine the vertex, know its meaning in a word problem. We're learning that if a question involves maximum or minimum, that means you have to put it in vertex form and how to sketch a graph that goes with your word problem. So recap here, a parabola is in vertex form when it looks like this. The vertex is HK and the step number is A. And that's the most graphing friendly format. And we also wrote in our last note that if A was positive, so greater than 0 means is positive, right? Yep, I am. Thank you for reminding me though. If A is positive, the quadratic function has a minimum value of K, and that's because A being positive means it opens upward. And if A is negative, meaning less than 0, the quadratic function has a maximum value of K, which would be upside down. And the procedure of changing it from standard to vertex form is called completing the square. Okay, so we've done that. Now we're just amping it up. Determine the exact coordinates of the vertex of each quadratic function. Notice exact here. Okay, so you can't give me approximately. State the maximum or minimum value of each quadratic function. Okay, so there's two cases that involve fractions, and in my opinion, this is the easy type. And the other type, where you have to have a fraction, is the harder type. Okay? So this one's easier because when you divide by negative 1/6, so I want to get what goes in the brackets, so my step number is negative 1/6. Okay, not a very nice friendly step number. Certainly wouldn't want to try graphing it, going over 1 and down 1/6. That would be super annoying. Okay, but it's a step number, and I want to factor those these two terms. So you should know in your heart that if you do negative 1/6 x squared and you divide it by negative 1/6, that those negative 1/6 just divide it. Everybody good with that? You're left with x squared. What's more challenging is to figure out the 3x divided by negative 1/6. Okay? So we just, even yesterday, we divided by a fraction. What was our rule for dividing by a fraction? Multiply by the reciprocal, so 3x times negative 6 over 1. Okay? And then the 3x is really out of a 1 too, right? And multiplying is the easy one, top by top. Bottom by bottom, but they're both 1s. Do I need to put a 1 on the bottom? No. So that means that 3x divided by negative 1/6 is negative 18x. The reason I call this the easy type is because when I divide by this fraction, I end up getting a whole number in the brackets. Okay? So that's my first step, close my bracket, and then plus 2. So now it's, the next step is to complete the square inside the brackets. So that's similar to what we did earlier. So I would do x squared minus 18x plus, and then figure out what I add. I take half of 18, which is 9, and square it, which is 81. But I also have to subtract 81, close my brackets, and add 2. Okay, so now we're on to the step where we factor that. So that's going to give me x minus, square root of 81 is 9 squared, But then the issue comes of getting that negative 81 out of the graphic. So I have to multiply it out, correct? So I'm thinking I have to do negative 81 times negative 1/6, right? To get it out, you multiply. How do I multiply those? Top by top, bottom by bottom, love it. So that's going to give me positive 81 over 6. Does that reduce? I don't think 6 goes, I think 3 goes into both of them.
Yeah.
So I can divide top and bottom by 3 to reduce it. And that's going to give me 27 over 2. So this red add 27 over 2 comes from multiplying the negative 81 by the negative 1/6. Now, a lot of people have a fraction button on their calculator that they may or may not know how to use. And the button looks like this. Does anyone have a button that looks like that in the calculator? Somewhere? A with a little b over c? Okay, so what you could do is you could do negative 81 times, and then you're going to do negative 1/6, but you type it in as negative 1, and then your fraction button, and then a 6. Okay, so negative 81 times negative 1 fraction button 6, and then press equals. And you should see something that looks like this: 13 with a little L, so backwards L. Do you see that on your calculator? Yours says syntax error. How many people see that? That means 13.5, but your calculator is also going to change that to 27 over 2 for you in a second. If you hit shift and the fraction button again, then it's going to change it to 27 over 2. Shift your second. And it changes it to 27 over 2. So that red number there, you can get on your calculator by doing negative 81 times negative 1/6 with your fraction button. Okay? Anyone need help with their fraction button? This doesn't work?
What were your methods?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so let's try that. There you go. Negative 1. Arrow down. Over 6. Anyone else need help? Jack's actually is nicer. I like that one. Okay, this fraction button looks like this, which is pretty sweet, right? That's a sweet looking fraction button. Plus 2. All right, so I'm still not done. I have to add those two together. How do I add those two together? Fraction and a whole number. What do I need to do to add a fraction and a whole number? Get a common denominator. Nice. So my common denominator is going to be 2. So plus each out of 2, so 27 out of 2, because that already had 2 as the denominator. Here I had to multiply the bottom by 2, so the top becomes 4. Okay? So I'm adding those together. And that's going to give me, so 31 over 2. So let's read back the question. Determine the exact coordinates of the vertex. State the max or min value of each function. Okay, so we now know that A is -1, 6, H is 9, and K is 31 over 2. Which means my vertex is at 9 and 31 over 2. And how do I know whether it has a maximum or a minimum? It is negative, so it has a maximum. Max value of 31 over 2. Okay. So to me, that's the easy type of fraction or text form question. Part B is the harder type. Because it doesn't look as threatening. It doesn't look threatening because it doesn't start with a fraction in it, but you create a fraction and factor out the step number. Okay? So when you factor out 3 from these two terms, 3x squared divided by 3 is x squared. But what's 5x divided by 3? And you can't write that down, right? Because that's not exact. So you have to write 5/3 of x. Okay? Close your bracket, -1. So these are the harder ones because you create a fraction when you factor out the step number. And this is where everybody's favorite game comes in. Half that fraction. So in order to complete the square, I have to take half that fraction and square it. So what do we know half of 5 over 3 is, everybody? 5 over 6? Yep. And then when we square it, what do we get when we square 5 over 6? Square the top and the bottom. That's the rule. Okay.
25 over 36.
Yep. So we add 25 over 36. And subtract 25 over 36. Close our bracket, -1. So remember, it's half this number squared is what you add and subtract. Half this number squared is what you add and subtract. Okay? So then these go in my box. So I get y equals 3, and then the square root of x squared is x. The sign from the middle term is positive. And then I'm thinking, I'm just going to kind of dot this, I want to take the square root of this. Well, I can just take the square root of the top of it and the square root of the bottom of it. Okay, so the square root of 25 is 5. The square root of 36 is 6. Okay? Squared. Now I still have to get this out. And I can use my fraction button if I want to multiply them, or I can multiply them on the side. So I'll let everybody try to multiply -25 over 36 by 3 and reduce. Whether you do it on the side, or you do it on your calculator, you gotta be able to do it. So that means negative 2 and 1 half. So then what we get shifts, and that's fine again because it is an improper fraction for you. And you're fraction down. Yeah, negative 25. Okay, so what you should have gotten is negative 25 over 12. If you can get that on your calculator, great. If not, then you do it negative 25 over 36 times 3 is negative 75 over 36. So you can divide top and bottom by 3 to reduce it, and you get negative 25 over 12. Okay? And then you still need the minus 1. Now, the next step is to subtract those. In order to do that, you need a common denominator. So if I make this denominator, if I change the bottom of this from a 1 to a 12, what do I change the top to? Also a 12, right? Because I had to multiply the bottom by 12 and multiply the top by 12. Okay? So then I'm going to get y equals 3 times x plus 5 over 6 squared. And then negative 25 twelfths minus 12 more twelfths is negative 37 twelfths. So now I know that a is 3, h is negative 5/6, k is negative 37 over 12. So my exact vertex is negative 5/6, negative 37 over 12. And this one, because a was positive, has a minimum value of whatever k is, so in this case of negative 37 over 12. Yes?
Does the 5/6 switch from a positive to a negative?
Yes. It doesn't switch, but the regular vertex form looks like this. So the only way you see a positive in here is if it was x minus negative 5/6. That's how you would see a plus in the bracket. Okay? Pretty good? Ish? Okay. All right, next one. So to me this is the easier type because I'm not gonna create a fraction. I'm gonna get an integer. So my step number is negative 2/3. Okay? So I'm mentally or on the side or with my calculator dividing each of those terms by negative 2/3. So hopefully we know in our hearts that negative 2/3 x squared divided by negative 2/3 is just x squared. Okay? Everybody good there? Next one's the harder one. So 8x divided by negative 2/3. That's where we have to know that to divide by a fraction, you multiply by the reciprocal. So it's going to change to 8x times negative 3 over 2. I always like to keep the negative sign at the top number. And then I multiply the tops together, negative 24x. The bottoms together, 2. And then it reduces to negative 12x. So 8x divided by negative 2/3 turns out to be negative 12x. Now see if you can do on your calculator 8 divided by negative 2/3 and see if it gives you negative 12. Then you just have to remember the x. You may be able to do that, 8 divided by negative 2/3 using the fraction button. Okay? Yep. Okay, remember, don't forget the x. That's a one hazard of using the fraction button, but it's still okay to remember. Okay? Alright, so next time through, we're going to complete the square, and it's easier to complete because we don't have a fraction inside the bracket. So we take half of 12, which is 6, and square it. So 6 squared is 36. So add 36, subtract 36, close your bracket, add 5. So we get g at x equals negative 2/3, and then x minus 6 all squared, and then the challenge is multiplying those two together. So I could use my fraction button, negative 36 times negative 2/3 gives me 24. Nice. Positive 24 plus 5. And I'll just write it at the side here too, the calculation there. So it'd be negative 36 times negative 2/3 gives you 72/3, which turns out to be 24. Okay. Great, and then the last step is just to collect those terms at the end. And we don't need a common denominator because they're just integers. So now you can put it into standard vertex form, so you can figure out A, H, and K, the vertex, and the maximum or minimum value. So A is negative 2/3, H is 6, K is 29. So the vertex should be at 6 and 29. And because A is negative, it would have a maximum value of 29. Okay, good with that one? All right, next one. So f at x equals negative 6, and then I want to factor it out of those terms. So what's 2x divided by negative 6? I'll accept one of two answers. Yep. Negative 1/3 x. I'll accept. Yep. Or negative 2/6x. Either one's fine. Okay. You had negative 2/6 x. He just reduced it because he decided to divide top and bottom by 2 to get negative 1/3. Okay. So either one's fine. Everybody good? And then close your bracket. Minus 3. It's probably easier to leave it as negative 2/6, just because then when you take half of it, it's 1/6, like it's got an even number on top. Okay? As long as you reduce stuff at the end, it doesn't matter when, like, as long as you make sure it's reduced at the end. All your fractions. Alright, so then the next step is to complete the square. So to do that, you have to take half of 1/3, or half of 2/6, which everybody should know is 1/6. Okay? Half of 1/3 is a 6, or half of 2/6 is 1/6. But then you've got to square it, which means you square the top and square the bottom. So you're adding 1/36 and subtracting 1/36. half that number and square it. Complete the square. And the first three terms form your perfect square trinomial. So we get -6, x, sign from the middle, square root of 1/36. You can think of as the square root of 1 over the square root of 36. Okay? So what would that be? 1/6? Be okay with that? Being 1/6? Squared. Now I have to get that out of the bracket. I have to multiply those together. So negative 1/36 times -6 is 1/6. 1/6 plus 1/6, and then I'll show the calculation at the side. So negative 1/36 times -6. Multiply the tops together, bottoms together, reduce, and you get 1/6. Okay? And then you still need the -3. Which I should have done in blue. So now my next step is I have to take 1/6 and subtract 3. Okay, so I need a common denominator there. So plus 1/6 minus, so I have to make 3/1 out of 6. So I had to multiply the bottom by 6, so I have to do that to the top as well. Okay? So I'm making -3 into -18/6. So plus 1/6 minus 18/6 is minus 17/6. Okay? So then we know A is -6. H is 1/6. K is -17/6, which makes my vertex equal to 1/6, -17/6. And because A was negative, it's got a maximum value of -17/6. Okay. All right. Do you want time to try this one? You guys did a really good job on that one. Okay, so 3x squared divided by 3 is x squared. A couple people were unsure about what's x divided by 3. So a lot of people had x over 3, but it's probably easier to see the fraction if you think of it as 1/3 x. Okay, so 1x divided by 3 is 1/3 x. So that would be your first step. Okay, make the 1/3 pop out in front of the x. And then once people had that, I was super impressed with how many people knew that half of a third was a sixth, and they were squaring a sixth to get what to add and subtract. And I didn't see anybody with a 2 on top, which is a common error. 1 squared is 1, not 2, okay? I didn't see anyone do that, so that's really good. So plus a 36, minus a 36, close your bracket, subtract 2. Should have been your next. Okay? And these three form our perfect square trinomial. So that's going to give me x, sign from the middle, plus square root of 1 is 1, square root of 6 is 6, squared. And then I have to multiply that out of the brackets. Okay? And I saw lots of people get negative 1/12 there. Minus 2. And if you are doing it with your calculator, then you want to see the calculation for that. You're doing negative 1/36 times 3, which you make out of 1. Multiplying is just multiply the tops together, bottoms together, and then reduce. And that's how you get the negative 1/12 that we got over here. Okay? And then we have to get a common denominator in order to get the k value. So my common denominator is going to be a 12. So if I make the denominator 12, I had to multiply by 12, so I have to multiply the numerator by 12. Okay? And then negative 1/12 minus 24/12 is negative 25/12. Okay? So that would be the correct vertex form. And then A would be negative 3. H would be negative 1/6. So be careful there. It's the plus sign in the bracket. And K would be negative 25/12. So the vertex would be negative 1/6, negative 25/12. Yep.
How did we get negative 3?
Oh, my bad. I just added in?
Yeah.
Nice. Nice. Okay, so what did that mess with?
It didn't.
It didn't? Okay. Good, good. That just means we're going to have a minimum value. Of negative 25/12. Good, yeah, I did times by positive. All right, yep,
If you go right from the step where it says negative 1/12 minus 2,
yep,
right down to that, is that fine?
yeah.
Okay. That's fine.
Everybody okay? That to me, that's the hard one, where you create the fraction. The other one where the fraction creates an integer is a bit easier, okay? They're both, they're not the easiest thing in the world, but. All right, so a lighting fixture manufacturer has daily production cost of C equals 1/5 n squared minus 8n plus 660, where C is the total daily cost in dollars and n is the number of light fixtures produced. How many fixtures should be produced to yield a minimum cost? Make a labeled sketch with your solution. So I always start with my sketch, because I want to kind of have an idea of what's going to go on. And this is where Y would be to C, so this is going to be cost. And then I look and see if they give me units, cost is in dollars. And then this is going to be my N axis, and N stands for number of light fixtures. I'm just going to put lights, number of lights. Produced, okay. And I know that the y-intercept or vertical intercept is 660 lights, right? So I'm going to mark that on my graph as 660. And since the A value is positive, I know I'm going to come down to a minimum. So it's going to look something like that. So there's my sketch. I'm going to be able to label the vertex after I put that into vertex form. And the reason I know to put it into vertex form is because it asks me for the minimum cost. If it asks me for the minimum or maximum, I have to put it in vertex form. Okay? So now I go and do that. So I want to factor the 1/5 out of the terms containing n. Okay, so remember, a lot of people I see are using their calculator, they're doing -8 divided by 1/5, and that's telling it to them, okay? And you can also do it on the side by knowing that dividing by a fraction is multiplying by the reciprocal, okay? And then you would get -40n over 1, which is -40n. Or you do the calculator method and you do -8 divided by 1/5, but you don't forget to drop the n. So you should get a -40n there on your first step. Okay? And then plus 660. So everybody, make sure you can get that 40, either on your calculator, on the side work, figure out, make sure you can get that 40. Okay? Anyone want me to go through it again, how you get that 40, number 40? So that's where it all happens. If you can't get, you want me to go through it again? Okay. So you're going to take -8n and divide it by 1/5. You divide by what you're factoring out. Okay? So -8n divided by 1/5. I'll just write it again here. So -8n divided by 1/5. So this is a divide sign. When you divide by a fraction, you multiply by the reciprocal of that fraction. Okay? And then the denominator of the -8n is just a 1. And then once I've turned it into a multiply, I multiply the tops together. So -8n times 5 is -40n. And I multiply the bottoms together. 1 times 1 is 1. And -40 divided by 1 is just -40. So I get -40n there. Yes? Everybody thumbs up for -40n? Okay. That's probably the hardest piece there. Hello. I'm good for today. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Keep completing the square. Do you know how to sharpen 1, 2, 3? If you don't worry about it. It's fine. Yeah, these are taken from EQ ago, so it will sharpen the image. Don't worry about it. It's for next Friday.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Okay. All right, so if we keep on completing the square here, here's where we take half of 40, which is 20, and square it. So 400. So we add 400, subtract 400, and then close our bracket plus 660. Okay? So then, if you factor the perfect square trinomial, you're going to get n minus 20 squared. Everybody get about how to get the 20? Square root of 400. Okay? But now I want to get the -400 out of the bracket, so I have to multiply -400 times 1/5. Okay? Which ends up giving me something nice, I'm pretty sure. Yes, -80. Look. So -80 plus 660. Okay? And then again, if you don't want to do it on your calculator, you do -400 times 1/5. Times is the easy one, top by top, bottom by bottom, reduce, and you get -80. Okay? Is it good there? All right, and then you're going to combine those two. And you get 580, positive 580. Don't forget to put a sign here. A lot of people just put 580, which looks like a multiply, but it's add. Everybody good? Okay, so now I need to know A, which is a fifth. H is 20. And K is 580. A good way to catch yourself in a word problem, would it make sense for H to be negative? No, like look at our graph here. Okay, we're going to have a negative number of lights produced. Okay. So our vertex is going to be 20 and 580. And remember, this is our horizontal, and this is our vertical component. So that means that if I'm reading off my sketch here, that's going to be 20 lights, and this is going to be $580. Does that make sense? Okay, so always put your vertex like labeled onto your sketch so you know what each thing means. And then read the question and make sure you answer the question they ask. And the question says, how many fixtures should be produced to yield a minimum cost? So the question is asking how many lights they should make so that the cost is a minimum. How many lights should they make so that the cost is a minimum? Anyone think they know how many lights they should make? Owen? 20. 20 lights produces the minimum cost. Okay? So they're not asking what is the minimum cost, which would be $580. They're asking how many lights should you make so that you get a minimum cost. Okay? So your therefore statement is going to be therefore they should produce 20 lights. So always make sure you answer the question they ask, because it's going to be, if you see minimum or maximum, it's going to be about the vertex, but it could be about the horizontal component of the vertex, or it could be about the vertical one. Okay, so read the question carefully, and the sketch helps you interpret it as well. And then part B, what is the daily cost when 27 light fixtures are produced? So you have to be able to look at your question and see whether they're giving you, in this case, a cost, or are they giving you a number of light fixtures? They're giving me N, and they're asking for C, which is the easier version of it, right? I can just substitute N into my original equation if I want, or the vertex form, probably easier to sub it into the original. So C equals 1/5 N squared minus 8N plus 660. And then I'm going to replace each N with a 27. And then I should be able to just put that right into my calculator the way it looks. You don't need a fraction button, you can just do 1 divided by 5 times 27 squared, okay? So try putting in your calculator. Did you guys get $589.80? Because I did not take it in right. I could have done it wrong too.
I got 729.
I got 589.80 again. Did anyone get 589.80? Okay. Okay, so
I got 589, but I'm guessing in a fraction.
oh, and a fraction? Do you have a little converting button? Yeah, that is. Okay, so did you use your fraction button when you did it? Okay. So if you do that divided by 5, you get it. So just remember that.
So just type the thing on your
calculator.
calculator. 729.
Okay.
I'll type it out.
This is literally what I did.
minus 8.
Okay, but then you'll see minus 8 times 27
Okay,
plus 6.
so now do the shift fraction.
You do all of it. Yeah, it's all of them.
Oh, yeah. Oh, here you go. Okay, so then you're just, you want to get ahead of a fraction? Yes, you do. So you want to
So I do want to.
second in your body fraction. And then equals. And then you just do 2949 divided by 5, it'll give it to you as a decimal. Okay? Anyone else need help with this? Yep, Cindy? And here So you second your fraction again. And then try to second your Okay, so then just do 2949 divided by 5. That is over 5, right? Yeah, let's type in 2949 divided by 5, and it'll give it to you as this. Anyone else curious? So just figure out what 1/5 is 0.2 times 27 squared. Minus 85 times 27 plus 6. Anyone else need help with their calculator? You just, okay, so we don't go fraction button, that's what I did. I just did 1 divided by 5 is 0.2. And I did 0.2 times 27 squared minus 8 times 27 plus 6. Okay? All right. All right, so what is the daily cost? Therefore, the daily cost is $589.80. Okay, next one. How many light fixtures are produced if the daily cost is $630? So this time, are they giving me C or are they giving me N? C, and we have to figure out N. So in that case, we use the vertex form, because in the vertex form, the N is only in one spot. So vertex form for this one was 1/5 N minus y squared plus 580. Okay. Short-term memory is nothing. Yes. Okay. So I can replace C, the cost, with 630. And then I want to use reverse BEDMAS. So what would be the first thing I would do to both sides here?
Get rid of
5. Subtraction. Okay, so I do 630 minus 580 is 50. Now, what can I do to both sides that takes care of that 1/5? I can divide by 1/5, but what's easier than doing that? Multiplying by 5. So I can multiply both sides by 5. So 1/5 times 5 is 1. Okay, so that was my reason for doing it, was to undo the divide by 5. And 5 times 50 is 250. Now I'm on the square root step. Everybody good? Okay, so square root both sides and put a plus or minus here. And then I'm going to switch it around so it says n minus 20 equals positive or negative 250. And then I'm going to add 20 to both sides. So I've got n equals 20 plus or minus root of 250, which really breaks into two answers. 20 plus the square root of 250 and 20 minus the square root of 250. So 20 plus the square root of 250, 35.8. So I'll put approximately a little dot here. And 20 minus the square root of 250, approximately 4.2. Both answers aren't negative, are we good? So, and then we're going to say we can't really build part of a light fixture, so approximately 36 if we round to the nearest light fixture, and approximately 4 if we round to the nearest light fixture. Now let's look back on our graph and see why that makes sense, okay? Remember, our cost was 630. So here's 580, here's 660, so 630 is about here. Would you agree? Between 580 and 660? And if I look down, would it make sense that this is about, what was it, 4? Yeah. And then this one was about 36? Okay, so there is two values that make it true according to the curve, okay? So your therefore statement would be if they produce about 4 lights or 36 lights, their cost would be 630. Okay, so both answers are valid. You don't have one positive, one negative. All right, so our answer is going to be either about 4 lights or 36 lights results in a cost of $630. So both answers are okay. All right, so our last question. Right, so it says the cost C in dollars of operating a ferry boat depends on the speed V in kilometers per hour of the boat. According to this function, determine the speed the boat should travel at to minimize, as soon as I see that I'm going to have to put in vertex form, the operating cost. And I'm always going to do a sketch. So on my y side of the equation, I have C, which stands for cost in dollars. And on my x side, I have V, which stands for speed in kilometers per hour. And I've got a positive A value, so I know I've got like a normal U shape. I know my y-intercept is at 664, and then I know I'm a smiley face and not a frown because the A value is positive. Okay? Yeah? Everyone buy everything so far? Okay. So now we got to put it in vertex form to figure out the speed the boat should travel at to minimize the cost. So I need to divide 2/3 out of the terms that contain V. See if you can do that either using your calculator or calculator on the side. divide each of the first two terms by 2/3. Okay, you've got 36 and you've got 1 of the 36. I'm guessing 1 is this correct. So try negative 24 divided by 2/3. Negative 36. So the 2/3 v squared divided by 2/3 is just v squared. It's the negative 24v divided by 2/3 that can give you problems, right? You can do it on your calculator, or you can remember that dividing by a fraction is multiplying by the reciprocal. And that's going to give you negative 72v over 2, which is negative 36v. And then close your bracket plus 664. So that should be your first step. Everybody okay getting the negative 36v part? Yes? Okay. So then from there, I feel like it gets easier. You can complete the square. This is the type where we get rid of the fraction instead of creating it. Okay. I noticed a couple people that have this written down. What's the issue? There's no v with the 36. Okay. You forgot the v, don't forget the v, that's a mark off. Okay, got the v. It has to have the v because that creates a perfect square trinomial that you can factor. Okay? So negative 324 times 2/3. Negative 216 plus 664 plus 448. Everybody good for there? Okay, so then you have to figure out the vertex. So A is 2/3, H is positive 18, which makes sense. K is 448. So my vertex is at 18 and 448. And I'm going to add that to my graph. Oops. So that means this is 18, the horizontal component, and this is 448. Okay? And then I have to make sure I answer the question. It wants the speed that will minimize. So speed is along the horizontal axis, okay? Whereas cost is along the vertical axis. So if it wants the speed, it wants the 18. So the boat should, therefore the boat should travel at 18 kilometers per hour to minimize cost. Whew, that was a lot. Okay, now you just need the practicing. I'll leave that there while you have the practice, and then I'll save it for the kids. You got 15 minutes. Yeah.
I did that one for the previous question. Sorry, I was 15. Yes.
Yeah, just if there's two people in there, Adrian, you have to wait outside on a little second, right? Finish the practice and then you. Yeah. Okay, I just have to save this recording, and then I will get Nelson.